Welcome back, everyone. After very enriching sessions over the last 2 days on cutting edge research and policy, it's now time to change gears, but only a little bit, to discuss a very essential part of the research ecosystem, research management. To anchor this session, I have the pleasure of introducing Dr. Savita Iyer. After a PhD in developmental biology and a postdoctoral stint at the University of Cambridge, UK, Savita moved to Wellcome Trust, where she trained in research management. She then returned to India to set up the RDO, the Research Development Office at NCBS Bangalore. It was under her stewardship that operations at the NCBS RDO grew to include international partnerships, grant management, philanthropic fundraising, and communications. Having earned this rich experience, she founded Jacaranda Tree, an independent consultancy service supporting organizations with their research management needs. She currently works on behalf of India Alliance as the lead for IRMI, India Research Management Initiative, which she's very happy to talk to us about. Over to you, Savita. The virtual stage is yours.
Thank you so much, Madan. It's a pleasure to be here at the India Alliance Annual Conclave today. And it takes me back to 2019, to the India Alliance Fellows meeting. The India Alliance was just getting ready to launch IRMI, and I'd spoken about IRMI and had wonderful interactions with the researchers. So, of course, in the last 2 years, a lot of things have changed, but IRMI has moved forward. And so it's wonderful to have this opportunity to talk about IRMI and about research management. I'd like to invite my colleagues, Madhuri Datta and Vinita Raghavan, to join me. Madhuri, Vinita, could you turn on your cameras, please? So I'm joined by two wonderful colleagues today. They're both very experienced research managers. Madhuri and Vinita have research backgrounds, and they have more than a decade of experience each in research management here in India. And today, together, the three of us are going to take you through research management. What is research management? What are the benefits of research management to researchers and to institutions? And then towards the end of the session, I will talk a little bit about IRMI and about the resources that are available through the India Research Management Initiative for Indian institutions. So Abdul, could I request you to share my slides, please? Next slide, please. So let's just bring the researcher into focus here. I mean, this is the best place, really, at the India Alliance Annual Conclave. We really rely on researchers to come up with the best ideas that shape the world we live in today. But looking at the life of a researcher, it's quite a busy life. So researchers typically busy juggling priorities that would include teaching, research, mentoring, and administration. Ideating, seeking and applying for funding, and managing funding can take up a lot of time for the researcher. The researchers typically needs to look after their own career development and the career development of their colleagues whom they're responsible for. Building and managing partnerships can take up a lot of time and effort on the part of a researcher. And of course, particularly in the world of life sciences, regulatory compliances form an important part of the obligations of a researcher. And there's always the pressure to publish. So it's a busy life. Next slide, please. So if you look at this from the institutional perspective, tapping into diverse funding streams can enhance the collective resource base and visibility for an institution. But however, working with diverse funding streams entails understanding different sets of policies, procedures, and complying with all the nuances of the terms and conditions of the different funding agencies. And so from an institutional point of view, what this also means is that there needs to be tailored follow through by all the administrative teams that would include finance, HR, procurement, and so on. And of course, we've discussed statutory compliances. So institutions have an obligation to ensure that all research conducted at the institution complies with these regulations. And of course, there's managing expectations of diverse stakeholders. So institutions try their best to provide as much support as they can to their researchers, particularly to try and reduce the administrative workload, to allow the researchers to focus on their own research activities. So here's where I'd like to introduce this term called research management. This is a global profession which arose from a need for researchers and institutions to tap into diverse sources of funding support, research funding support. And this profession has been in existence for at least 4 to 7 decades in countries such as the UK and the US. So, from the researcher perspective, this involves providing them support with, letting them know about different funding opportunities as they emerge, meeting institutional and funder norms, management of awards, and adhering to ethical guidelines. And from the institutional perspective, research management support offers an avenue for centralized services that ensure that risks to institutions from working with diverse funding systems are minimized. And this is currently a gap in the Indian research ecosystem. Next slide, please. So, if we look at this in a little bit more detail, and across the world, institutions might choose to support their researchers with centralized services for partnership building, for example. So, partnerships that are international partnerships, multi institutional partnerships, industry partnerships, pre award support, which is typically all of the activities leading to the submission of a grant, post award support, and making sure that all of the reporting requirements are met, the funds are managed properly. Program management. So, increasingly, scientists across the world are involved in large consortia based programs because we are facing very large challenges now. And the way to deal with those challenges is for diverse groups of experts to come together, and management of such large programs requires dedicated support. I've already mentioned ethics. So, an institution, particularly carrying out life sciences research, would have an ethics secretariat supporting these functions, and also organized methods for tabulating research output and for managing research information. So, if you look at different institutions across the world, this could be known, such an office could be known by different names. Could be called a research development office, could be called an office of sponsored research, the sponsored research and industry collaborations office, and there are many such names. But the key point to make is that any such centralized service requires skilled staff who are able to understand the needs of the researchers and the challenges of administration and find solutions, both for researchers and for institutions. Next slide, please. And as I mentioned, these kind of services are quite the norm in countries such as the UK and the US, but that's not so in India. A few institutions in India have comprehensive services that span all of these different sectors that I just mentioned, but the vast majority of institutions don't have such services. And it is really with this motivation that the India Alliance launched IRMI, or the India Research Management Initiative, seeking to help institutions that want to develop research management support and to help research managers who want to develop careers in this field, and working through these modes, finally contributing towards robust research ecosystems here in India. Next slide, please. So I'd now like to take a few minutes to introduce my co-panelists, and I request Vinita actually to turn on your video. And Vinita, could you just talk us through your career trajectory and what you do at the Bangalore Life Science Cluster now?
Sure, Savita. So I started my career the regular academia route. I did my PhD in plant virology from ICGB New Delhi. Then I did a couple of postdocs, one in Memorial Sloan Kettering Cancer Center, and the second postdoc at the Yale School of Medicine. After completing 6 years of postdoctoral experience, I returned to India, and at that point of time, I made a switch to the field of research management and administration and joined the Research Development Office, which was at the time a pioneering office in the Bangalore Life Science Cluster, which was spearheaded by Savita. And slowly over the years, I started off as a grants advisor and have climbed the ladder from being a grants manager, pre-award to grants manager. And now currently I head the grants and research collaborations vertical of the Research Development Office. I have close to 11 years of experience in the research management and administration field. And in my current role at the Bangalore Life Science Cluster, my responsibilities include strategic grants advice, bid development, operations management of the team, the strategy formulation, partnership building, global engagement, managing research collaborations, and outreach to funding agencies.
Thank you so much, Vinita. Welcome to the conversation.
Thank you.
Next slide, please. Madhuri, please could I request you to introduce yourself?
Thank you. Thank you, everyone. And thank you for this opportunity, India Alliance. So like Vinita, I also started with a PhD in life sciences in biotechnology from the CSIR Institute, Indian Institute of Chemical Biology. Then I did my postdocs in the US in cell biology and neuroscience. Then I came back. I wanted to be in science, but not on work on bench work. And so at that time, the India Alliance was recruiting grants advisors, and I joined the India Alliance during that time as the grants advisor, and that sort of initiated an interest in me in research management. And towards the end of my tenure at India Alliance, I also wanted to look at public health research in India because it was very important to me to understand how bench research is translated to community-based research or to communities. And so I took up a role of head of grants administration at Public Health Foundation of India. And there actually I learned about research management and sort of coordinating between researchers and senior management and setting up an ecosystem of research management. After that, I joined the Indian Institute of Health Management Research. That was also a research training and education institute in public health. And after that, right now, I am the head of Center for Operational Research Excellence at George Institute for Global Health, which is based in India. It is a multi-country institute that looks at public health research. And I'm very happy to be here. And my main role at George Institute is to provide strategic direction to operational research. That's it, Savita. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Madhuri. Abdul, could I request you to play a video for us? So for our audience, Madhuri, Vinita, and I recorded a conversation a few days back, and we're just going to play that for you. Over to you, Abdul. So Madhuri, Vinita, very warm welcome to the conversation. So I think the first question I'd just like to ask both of you, Vinita, if I can start with you. What does your typical day look like? Over to you, Vinita. Vinita, I think you have to unmute yourself.
Thank you, Savita, and thank you for that great introduction about research management. It practically encompasses all that our office does. And now you ask a very difficult question when you say that what does a day in your life typically look like? And it's not always easy to say that we plan our day to the T. But while there is generally a framework of activities within which the office functions and within which we function, each day is different and brings its own challenges. So there may always be, urgent matters that crop up at any given point of time which need to take priority, and therefore you have to reset your goals for the day. So now, while we have efficient processes to help mitigate most of the chaos that comes with these kind of last minute urgent requests, one should always be open to work flexibility to accommodate these last minute urgent requests. So while this is challenging, I can say that being able to find solutions to drive outcomes for any of the issues related to grants management becomes very gratifying. But if you take away the unexpected urgent tasks from the day, I think the most important aspect of my day would be liaison. In one word, if we can define it, it would be liaison between investigators, the senior management, all the other departments in the organization, the funding agencies and external stakeholders. And why this is important is to ensure compliance with the funding agency requirements, both at the pre and the post award stages, and to resolve any queries or issues that may arise. And I think in one word, if I have to say this is one word that kind of encompasses what I mostly do during the day, it is liaison.
Thank you, Vinita. Madhuri, would you like to add your thoughts to that?
So I was just thinking about that question, and my typical day starts with opening my mailbox and sort of looking at the dozen emails that have dropped in from the previous day, and they encompass mails from pre-award processes, post-award processes. There are concept notes that investigators send in and ask if we can look at a proper funding organization which can fund that concept note. There are due diligence forms that have to be completed for funders after an award. But as a global organization and having offices in 4 countries, we also do a lot of SOP development and policy development for the institutes, and then getting a database management set up for the institution. One sort of database management system for all the regional offices. And for that, I also have to meet with colleagues in my workday. And also organizing research advisory committee meetings and ethics meetings is a part of our daily routine. Additionally, development, implementation of capacity building sessions is also a part, so we have to give thought to that. So in all, I think our workday is, I wish there were like 24 hours of working day in a day. And we are mostly doing our research manager's job in that 24 hours. So this is a typical day for us.
That's quite a lot. Thank you for sharing that. So Madhuri, I was just wondering, maybe, that's a really nice broad overview. And can you perhaps share with us an example where you worked with a faculty member at your institution and made a difference to their work? There are plenty of examples there.
There are plenty of examples, but the best thing a research manager can do and most satisfying is to break silos within research teams, because you have the oversight of all the research programs and activities going on in your institute. And so if you can develop programs by which researchers have a platform to exchange information about their own projects, about each other, then you can sort of encourage or inter-institutional partnerships and collaborations. So I think what I have done is I coordinate a weekly R&D session. And in that R&D session, all researchers can share their project work, challenges that they face, and best practices. And during the COVID period, this was very good because most of the researchers got motivations from senior researchers through this platform, and because our field work was stalled. And so, we sort of refocused ourselves, and we actually did a great job in finishing up all our publication work, as a result of which this year we have a higher number of publications than last year. So this actually institutional output gives me a great satisfaction. But the major thing I think a research manager makes a difference is to break the silos in between their own organizational teams.
Thank you, Madhuri. Put beautifully. Vinita, would you like to share some experience where you've helped a faculty member?
I think I'll add to what Madhuri said, and I think one of the most important values that we bring when we are saying we are helping a researcher is to actually strategize their funding requirements. How do they want to, this is their research program, to enable a research program. How do I strategize and harness different funding schemes from different sources? So basically what we would do is to help them harness different types of sources of funding to have a mixed portfolio. So you're not dependent on only government funding or philanthropic sources. So it's just a mixed portfolio of funding. And an example I can give for an individual researcher, for example, is one of the services that our office provides is for these young investigators who are transitioning from overseas into a faculty position in India. And they really don't have much idea about what is the research landscape, and they're looking for support in helping them at least harness some of the funding while they are transitioning, and when they come to the institution, they already have some amount of funding from an extramural source. An example of this was one of the young investigators from our campus who was transitioning from a postdoc into a faculty position here, and she was an HFSP postdoctoral fellow, and she had been offered a position, and she had the chance to apply for career development award from HFSP, but she also wanted to apply for the India Alliance Fellowship, and we worked very closely with her to try and stagger this fellowship so that when she came, she had the career development award, and then when she came and she settled down a bit, then we encouraged her to apply for the India Alliance Fellowship. So what that helped was to bring on a longer sustained funding for her research program when she was just coming into a new organization and setting up. So I think that is the kind of value that a research manager can bring even to people who are who have no idea about the research landscape in India and are looking to transition. How do they hit the ground running, really?
That's wonderful. Thank you. So I'm sure that's a huge benefit to the institution as well. The PI is obviously benefited, but naturally for the institution, that's wonderful. Could you share some thoughts, Vinita, on how the work from your office benefits the institution?
So yes, like you said, so this example that I shared, of course, benefits the researcher, but of course, the long-term benefit is for the research strategy of the institution. And as a central office, we do provide comprehensive support for fundraising, right from identifying funding to actually facilitating the submissions and activating the awards, and basically through the entire life cycle of the grant. So we start by proactively disseminating information, which is very crucial for PIs, both who are based in the institution or looking to come into the institution. And like Madhuri said, we do promote information about these kind of schemes, which can promote inter-institutional or interdisciplinary research, and that is very crucial for building the research profile of the institution as a whole. Right, and if we have a central research management office in the organization, what it provides is a central robust pipeline for facilitating this entire process. So there is a set of group of experts who can facilitate this, and in that sense, affect the help the research strategy of the organization. The other important aspect is ensuring compliance, and I think that is very important for an organization which is bringing in extramural funding. Now, that is ensuring compliance both at the pre-award and the post-award stages to ensure that the grant applications that come in, the projects that come in, have the required ethical or the regulatory approvals. And to be a central point for liaison between all the internal and external stakeholders. So now what that helps the institution in doing is to result in a submission of a well-developed and complete proposals and management of awards, which are in adherence with terms and conditions of the funding agency. That minimizes the risk to the organization per se, right? And also for creating long-term institutional memory. And I think that is very important because there is a central office which documents all the grants and all the projects that have gone out from the institution have been awarded. And that's also a place where we can actually give data analytics to in terms of grants data to the senior management to help them strategize the funding strategy for the organization as a whole. So I think what having a central research management office in our organization has resulted is a steady increase in not only submissions to different kinds of schemes from the campus, but also in terms of the funding successes and also the increase in the funds received for the campus.
That's awesome. Thank you so much. Madhuri, would love to hear from you. And I was wondering if you could also touch upon policy development, because that's really important for the organization. Go
Uh,
ahead.
I, so I think Vinita has really summarized it very well. So in addition to in-house collaborations, liaising with other supporting divisions, and contributing to institutional memory, I think there are two things. One is mapping the outputs of your institute. I think that is also a part of the research managers or research officers' responsibility, and that sort of motivation and that sort of showcasing of research outputs, I think that is very important place for the research office to play. And we have recently built a research evaluation toolkit within the organization that we are promoting all the researchers to think about the research impact right when they are designing their own studies, and also helping them map their research output through a project. The other thing about policy SOP, yes, that is very important. And if you can, the post award process of due diligence from funders, you'll have to provide a lot of policies that are prevalent in your institution, especially if you do, applications from funding organizations based in UK and US. And so we have a lot of in-house policies, and it's a very dynamic process because, last year we came up with a policy on how do we do ethical research when participants are children and vulnerable population. And also women in marginalized communities. And so that came up after a long-term discussion about how researchers are supposed to conduct themselves when they go into the field and work with participants. So it's a growing sort of field, but I think more than the funding organization, we also, when we discuss in-house during our R&D sessions, we sort of do that reflecting of what we are doing, and then can we reflect on it, develop an institutional policy around it so that new members of our institution can understand that these are important. And so that also combines with HR induction, because when a new person gets into our institute, the HR sort of tells them about the policies in place and how they are sort of, to conduct themselves in research teams. So that also is sort of a liaison between the research office, between researchers and the HR, and similarly finance policies, etc.
Thank you so much. Yes, I think it's this sort of central role, connecting different parts of the organization, and also, of course, connecting with the outside world. That's great. From what both of you have just shared here, it's a huge portfolio and it's a very diverse and challenging role. So I think, I'd love to hear from both of you how you've actually prepared for the role that you find yourselves in today. There's so many different aspects to the role. So how does one actually approach that? Madhuri, maybe hear from you first.
So I think my grants advisor's position at the India Alliance really helped me take an interest in research management as a profession. And through the research, the research manager's sort of responsibilities are more learning a lot through experiential sort of ways. But certain aspects like knowing all your resources and quickly sort of thinking about which is the best resource to provide an information very quickly, all that I think comes from experiential learning. And then empathy or understanding of another person's perspective, actually that really helps. And of course, knowing how to prepare a good database helps, because that is what I learned at the India Alliance also. And one can always take accreditation courses from different sources to manage a particular interest. Like if I have a growing interest or a need in my organization for IP, then the research manager should take a course in IP to understand that process better, so that they can be a central person in that entire process. I think more of my learning was from my grants advisor's role in India Alliance, and then my own interest in public health research. I think that really helped me.
Thank you, Madhuri. Vinita, how did you prepare for your role?
Well, to be frank, I didn't when I first made the transition, and this was I'm talking 11 years ago when I made this transition. At that point in time, really speaking, I didn't even know what this field entailed because I had been a student here and I had my own CSR fellowship for it. Then I went for a postdoc abroad. So really speaking, I did not have much idea about the research landscape in India. So when I made this transition, I came with actually not much information about the research landscape in India, what it entails to be a grants manager at all. And so first thing that you need to do when you make this transition is to have that mindset saying that this is something that you'd like to do because you're facilitating research, but you're moving away from your own research. And that is important. That is important to do. Now, in terms of how I prepared myself for a research manager, I think most of it was by mentoring. And Savita, I have to thank you for that, for being a fantastic mentor and initiating me into this role of grants management and research management as a whole. Most of my learning has initial years when I was just learning. I think it was mostly learning on the job. The establishment of the funding database, that was one of the first projects I undertook. I think that was very, very crucial in building my understanding of the research landscape of India. And at that point of time, 11 years ago, none of the funding agencies had very good websites as well. So it prompted you to just pick up the phone, call the program managers if you could find a number, and just write emails. So this art of being able to talk to people, to network with people, and to actually the email etiquettes also of how you pose a question so that it is something that will get you an answer, right? Rather than disturbing sensitivities of anybody. And these were very crucial things that I learned during my initial days as a research manager when I was just learning the ropes. Now, of course, learning is a continuous process, and 11 years down the line, I'm still learning and it never stops. But of course, as your years of experience increase in the field of research management, your job profiles change, and based on that, you have to adapt your training to take on more responsibilities. And there are a few things that I have taken on during this course, like Madhuri was mentioning IP courses. So when I first started taking on, drafting or negotiating agreements, I did not know enough about IP, and I thought that was a very crucial aspect of an agreement. So that was something that we needed to learn. So I just enrolled for a general course on IP management to at least understand what are the terminologies and what do these things mean. Then, of course, financial management of projects, that was ISA Pune conducts these fantastic courses on financial management of projects. And that was something that was also very useful. In addition to that, as I took on more leadership role, the EMBO leadership course really equips you with kind of soft skills that are required to fulfill your requirements as a leader. So I would say that it's not one set of things that, it depends on which role you're taking as a research manager, what are the job responsibilities this entails. And yes, there are a certain set of soft skills that you can already come equipped with, and a PhD and a postdoc already equips you with some of these soft skills. It's just about polishing those skills to the next level.
Thank you, Vinita. That's wonderful. So you mentioned networking, and what would your advice be to research managers who are joining the profession today? How can they go about networking? What are your thoughts on networking?
So networking is crucial. I would say that, if you want to build your knowledge base on what this field entails and what training you need to do to kind of, there are so many opportunities now that are coming up, which was not the case several years ago. In the last few years, you can see that an increase of awareness on research management. So networking is very, very crucial. And there are so many of these research management platforms and conferences that these are accessible to people now. or we are getting more aware of it. So I would say that one of the networking events that really, opened my eyes towards global practices on research management was attending this INOMS 2018, where I got an opportunity to meet other research managers to see the scale and scope of activities that were covered under research management. And I think that is very important. And that through that, you can build networks with other people who are experts in the field that you are not that expert on, and to build that relationship steadily to increase your knowledge base. And you can, of course, through this networking, always get information from them about other training programs or courses or accreditation programs that you may not be aware of, right? And how do you prepare for that? How do you approach that? That is very crucial. And networking, of course, with this growing number of research managers in India, it's an excellent platform where the research managers can exchange information about what they have learned from their job. And if you have an issue that you are not able to solve, there's a platform where you can discuss and find prospective solutions based on other people's experiences. And that is very important, because research management cannot be in silos. The challenges are diverse, and you're not always prepared to handle all kind of issues. So you have to find solutions. Sometimes you have to find very creative solutions. And if you have a networking platform where you can ask others who may have encountered similar situation and how they have found solutions, and perhaps adapt that to your own solutions, and that really helps. And of course, it's also a platform where you can exchange information about trainings and job opportunities. And the IRMI initiative of the India Alliance is a fantastic initiative in this regard. And I'm hoping that the field of research management will gain prominence in the coming years, with a lot of effort that is being put by IRMI into this effort in India.
Thank you so much, Vinita. Madhuri, I have a question for you. We've discussed quite often about professionalization of research management in India. Could I request you to share your thoughts on that? What do you think is needed in the years ahead in terms of professionalization?
So, Savita, actually, even though our growing number is increasing, I mean, the number of research managers across institutes in India is increasing, but there is no standardization of promotional track or career track for research managers at this point. Now, from my own experience, I've been in 3 organizations, and I had 3 designation, and then I did not have career track in any of them. And so it is very important. I understand about institutes, because a research manager is neither a researcher nor a supporting staff like a finance admin or IT. And so it is difficult, I guess, for an institute to think about, the roles. But I think there should be some sort of career track and promotional guidelines or appraisal guidelines for a research manager when you're employing a research manager in the office itself. And one of the things we can sort of think about is what are the criteria you will need to promote them based on their sort of acumen, or based on their knowledge in a particular area, or the activity that they do. Similar to I would say funding organizations, the government funding organizations within our country, where ICMR, DST, DBT have a centralized pool of scientists who also do a lot of administrative work, which is very similar to research managers. Can we have similar sort of track for research managers across institutes? And also, maybe it is time to build a professional development accreditation courses for research managers in India. I think that will not only allow existing research managers to understand what kind of courses and certifications they need, it will allow the institutes to understand what kind of skills research managers need, but it could probably help those who are on the fence between research and research management and don't know if they should become research managers, to take those courses and join the research manager team or band in India.
Thank you so much, Madhuri. And naturally, if we do plan a professional development framework and accreditation program for research management in India, this has to be a collaboration with the community. We will need input from all of our faculty, researcher colleagues. What would you like to see your research support team helping you with, and what do you think that they require training with? So let's keep this dialogue open, and I request all those who are attending this session today to be in touch with the IRMI initiative of the India Alliance and participate in the IRMI events and share your feedback on what services matter and how the research service staff should be empowered to help you best. And to all the research managers who are attending, I think Vinita's got some great advice with networking as well. Do make the best use of that with all the opportunities that are coming your way through IRMI and through other initiatives. And so, of course, a big thanks to Madhuri and Vinita for joining us today. Madhuri from the George Institute of Global Health, Vinita from the Bangalore Life Sciences Cluster. But what you've presented is, of course, the summation of many years of experience in different sectors, which you're now so effectively using at your respective organizations.
Thank you very much for the very engaging discussion, Savita, Madhuri, and Vinita. Uh, could we take a few questions from the audience, Savita? Uh, yeah, maybe I'll start with you, Vinita. There's a question about were there any hostile situations that you faced from members of the organizations when you were trying to change the way things have been managed, when you were setting things up?
I wouldn't exactly say hostile. That probably is too harsh a word. But of course, when a new thing is being, put in place, there is always a culture change that is required because people are used to a certain way of working. And when you bring in a new entity and that tells you how you need to do a certain set of activities so that your grant submission, for example, goes through effortlessly and seamlessly and on time. There's always a certain amount of reluctance because I think the first thing that we encountered when we started our services was that we know how to do this. So what is it that you are bringing in? Why are you asking us to do things a certain way when the way that we know works? So it's just a culture change that needs to be addressed, and I think it's not something that happens overnight. It's something that you invest in regularly, and once you work with a particular researcher and you've demonstrated value addition and how your role or your advice has helped make that application better or more streamlined, I think people adapt to that, and then they realize that yes, these are not people who are meant to be here as roadblocks, but rather as enablers, and that I think makes a difference.
Thank you, Vinita. Madhuri, would you like to share a couple of learnings from your side?
So I haven't really faced any hostile situation, but in addition to Vinita's comment, I would like to say that institutional leadership really matters a lot. I mean, if the institutional sort of leader knows that there is an importance of research manager and research management office in your organization and has been very critically sort of announcing your arrival and announcing the activities that you do, and then helps you with just mandatory, making it mandatory for everybody to sort of submit applications through the institutional research management office. I think that really works, and I'm really glad that in every institute that I've worked with, in PHFI or IIHMR or the present one, I'm extremely grateful to the institutional leadership for understanding the value that the Research Management Office brings in and supporting us in every way.
Sure.
And
Could
plus also making, having that one-to-one relation with every researcher in the organization, as Vinita pointed out.
Sure. Couldn't agree more. You also touched upon the importance of courses and continual learning. So there's a question about is there any course which can give overview about ethics and compliance, or is there a resource that you can point our audience to?
I think the ICMR does some courses, but I was just thinking, and this is based on some discussions that I've had with Savita. I think there's also a plan to have some sort of ethics workshop from IRMI itself, right, Savita? Savita can sort of talk about it in detail.
Sure. I mean, we are planning a whole sort of set of activities, webinars, workshops through ERMI initiative. So there will be something coming up early next year, and please just wait for the communications from the India Alliance. Madan, I was just wondering if we could sort of go back to my slide presentation because then we
Sure.
can bring that part to a close, and then we
Sure.
can continue with the discussions. Abdul, could I request you to? Yes, thank you so much, Abdul. So after that, discussion about research management and hearing from Vinita and Madhuri about their experiences, I'd like to spend a few minutes talking about the ERMI initiative itself. So some of you may know this, that the ERMI initiative builds on a 12-month pilot that was carried out during 2018. And I was very fortunate to be part of this pilot. And during the pilot, I actually interacted with 31 Indian institutions. We had ERMI sharing sessions, and at each of these sharing sessions, we had representatives from the leadership and also research managers. And these conversations helped us piece together a picture of research management as it existed in India in 2018. So our insights from the ERMI pilot were published in an open letter, and if you haven't read it, then please do read it, and I'd be happy to have further discussions on the ERMI pilot. But this really set the stage for the current phase of ERMI. Next slide, please, Abdul. So ERMI is now being developed to cater to 4 strategic priorities. The first priority is supporting research centers in India with strengthening their research management support. The second priority is supporting research managers with their career development and providing them networking opportunities. The third is actually building national and international partnerships for knowledge and resource exchange because there is a wealth of learning in other countries through other associations, and we stand to benefit a lot from engaging with those ongoing initiatives. And the fourth really important point here, the strategic aim of ERMI is creating a community of practice. I noticed that there is a message in the chat box about creating the community of practice, and I'd like to assure you that this is very much on our minds at ERMI. And so these 4 strategic aims of ERMI are being implemented through a combination of the flagship funding programs and community building activities. So let me talk a little bit about these. Next slide, please. So there are 3 funding opportunities through the ERMI initiative. There are the RM fellowships, which are intended for research institutions that want to launch their research offices. These are 3-year awards, and the institution is expected to nominate a fellow who will take these activities forward. So the India Alliance provides partial resources towards the salary of the fellow for 3 years, a training budget, and mentoring through the initiative. The second kind of grant are the RM grants. These are 1-year grants which are awarded to institutions that already have a research office but who would like to add some new feature to their research office, and there are resources provided for this. The third kind of funding opportunity are travel grants, because we would very much like Indian research managers to have the opportunity to travel and attend international conferences in the field of research management. So expanding the interactions beyond India, interacting with other colleagues across the world reflecting on it and seeing what changes they might want to bring back to their institutions. So we've already had 2 rounds of these awards, and the third round is in progress. So there are some excellent posters from some of the IRMI awardees, and I hope that the attendees will find some time to interact with the poster presenters and also with all our other IRMI awardees who are attending today. And as I mentioned, the third round is in progress, and the deadline for these funding opportunities is 30th November. So if you'd like to apply for IRMI funding, if you think your institution might be interested, all the details are present on the India Alliance website. And there's also an excellent webinar on these funding opportunities, which can be accessed through the India Alliance YouTube channel. Next slide, please. And that's just a reminder once again that the IRMI website is packed with information, both on the funding opportunities and all other resources that we've been collecting. That include blogs, video resources. So if you'd like to know more about research management, the resources section on the IRMI website is a go-to place for that. Next slide, please. And I mentioned building a community of practice, and this is really crucial for the IRMI initiative. So some of this actually began during the pilot phase, where each of the sharing sessions were an opportunity for small groups of Indian research managers to meet, and they presented their career stories. In fact, Madhuri was part of that, Vinita was part of that. And we realized how wonderful it was for our research managers to be sharing their stories with each other. So from that, the whole idea of bringing our community together for learning and for sharing best practice grew. And through 2019 and currently going forward as well, we've been curating several webinars and workshops through the IRMI initiative. In fact, 2020, we had 6 webinars focusing on different aspects of research management. And we had our own research managers speaking at these webinars. We also had colleagues from the overseas communities. We had colleagues from institutions. We also had funding agency representatives. And these were wonderful opportunities to reflect on what is research management, and also for our research managers to start coming together on a regular basis for sharing of experiences. The other thing we did, and this happened in February 2021 this year, was that we curated the first edition of a conference for our research managers. And this was such an incredibly enriching experience. Again, we had lots of discussions, sharing of experiences by our research managers. We also had some incredible panel discussions that brought together research managers, institutional leaders, and funding agency representatives. And there was a question on ethics earlier on in the conversation. Actually, we had an amazing panel discussion on ethics in research. So I'd just like to mention that video recordings of all of these sessions are available on the India Alliance YouTube channel in case someone would like to take a look at it. And here I'd like to bring in another dimension of community building. While we are also trying to gather all the research managers together and create platforms where they can interact, the IRMI annual conference happened because of one very special feature in addition to others, which was that we put together a planning committee that included senior research managers from India. So we had Vandana Gambhir from IISER Pune, Vidya Krishnamurthy from THSTI, and Mohammad Manzoor Akil from CMC Vellore. And they generously gave of their time, their expertise, and their creativity, and we all worked together for months together to curate the content for the conference. And this really was a wonderful opportunity for all of us to work together, to learn from each other, and to contribute towards a common goal of putting our first conference together. And this is a trend that we are continuing. So very happy to announce that we will be having a 2022 edition of the conference. And we now have a new conference planning committee in place. And Vinita, who's a co-panelist here today, is a member of the new conference planning committee. Next slide, please. And yes, I'd like to draw your attention to registration with the IRMI initiative. So on the IRMI website, there is a tab called Join Your Network. Join the IRMI network. And this can be used both by institutions and by individuals. And we are particularly keen on hearing from colleagues who are in research management support roles all across India. So please take some time to complete the registration form because it puts you on a mailing list. And we periodically email all the members in the mailing list with all updates of opportunities that are arising. And here I'd just like to share that with the IRMI individual registrations, this has grown. It's still a small number, but we started with knowing 27 research managers in 2018 during the IRMI pilot, and we're now at 62. And so we'd love to hear, and our members are based all across India. So we have members from Ahmedabad, Bangalore, Bhopal, all across India. And what we'd like to do very much, in addition to all of the structured webinars, workshops, and conferences, we will be organizing what I call the coffee and conversation sessions. These are for the network members. These will be informal discussions. We might have a theme or two, but by and large, they'll be spontaneous but moderated conversations. And we very much look forward to using these sessions as an opportunity for our members to just get to know each other and maybe then form special interest groups. Next slide, please. And for any queries, any suggestions on the IRMI initiative, you can always drop an email to the IRMI mailbox, that's IRMI@India Alliance. Now, I'd like to leave with one final thought. We've had some discussion about training for research managers. Every time we interact with research managers, with institutional leaders, this is always foremost on everybody's mind. And through the webinars and workshops, we made a start with sharing best practice on research management. And just the other day, I was actually at a discussion with several international colleagues, and the subject of the meeting was on developing training programs. And I realized that colleagues in other organizations, such as Sarima and IRMA in other countries, have put in decades worth of work into developing professional development programs for their research managers. So for IRMI, we have a very long journey ahead with creating such programs. But we have to make a start somewhere, and I'm very happy to say that through the IRMI initiative, we have put together a professional development committee. Madhuri, who's a co-panelist here today, is a member of the professional development committee for IRMI, as are Vidya Manzoor and also Soumya from the India Alliance. And what we hope to do, our first challenge for the professional development committee is for us to take a holistic look at what the research enterprise is likely to be in 3 to 5 years' time, and therefore what our research managers might be expected to support. And using that knowledge, can we put together the first version of a professional development framework for India for research managers? So this is the task that lies ahead for our committees, and please watch out for further updates from the India Alliance in this regard. And yes, we will need support from the community for this work, and we'll be reaching out to institutions, seeking your opinions, your feedback on what might make a difference and what the priorities could be. So on that note, I'll stop my presentation and we'll go back to taking the questions. Thank you, Abdul, for sharing the slides.
Thank you, Savita. Thanks a lot for those slides. Your presentation now did address a few questions that we have in the chat box, but there are a few more, maybe one or two before we close. So there was a question from Sandra, if you can share thoughts on what would be qualifications that research managers should develop, and is there any core competencies that that you would suggest for developing curriculum?
Yes, so I think this is a piece of work that lies ahead of us for the Professional Development Committee. And there are different opinions on this. Let's wait and see how the committee's thinking evolves, and we'll be in touch with the community over that.
Yeah, maybe we'll just take one last question from Simon Kerridge. Do you plan on working towards certification?
Yes, Simon, we do. That's very much so. Yes.
Yeah. Okay. Thank you so much. I think we also had a couple of people, researchers in the audience, who think they must switch roles now and become research managers. So it was thanks to you all for a very engaging session. Thank you so much.